Hello everybody, this is Tip Top MTG here today with another Magic the Gathering video. In today's video, I'm going to be breaking down every single spoiler for Commander Legend that have come out today being October 27th. So I'm essentially going to go through them in Wooburg order. I'm going to talk about my opinions on them. If they're new cards, I'm going to talk about how I think they're going to do. If they're old cards, well, at least for today's video, I'm not going to talk too much about them just because there are so many cards. I believe we're talking about like 47 cards today. And I'd rather spend your time, and I guess my time, talking about the new cards, which are much more exciting than cards like our first spoiler card we're going to talk about today, that being Raise the Alarm. So this is a card that's been printed to death, it feels like. Either way, it's a 2-cost white instant, and it creates 2/1/1 soldier creature tokens. So it's generally pretty good. You're getting 2 power and 2 toughness for 2 mana at instant speed. So it's a great little combat trick. It's good for decks that care about non-humans and things like that. But yeah, this card's been printed a ton. The only reason it's in here is for limited, so keep that in the back of your mind. White is going to want to do something maybe with tokens, which isn't that abnormal. Next, we have a new card, that being a Rebek, Architect of Ascension. It's a 4-cost white creature, legendary creature, human artificer, and it says artifacts you control have protection from each converted mana cost among artifacts you control, and it has partners. So you're going to want to throw this with another partner that cares about artifacts, maybe one that creates a lot of little artifacts that then you can give protection to like the common costed spells. So yeah, pretty good. Actually, this was one of the first uncommon partners that I was like, ooh, I really want to do something with this. I don't know what, and obviously the ability itself isn't that easy to build around because it is simply a protection ability. But I think if you combine this with the right partner, it could be really interesting. One thing to note though is that if you have an artifact that likes to target things and you have this out on the battlefield, you know, it's going to have protection from that ability. So if you have an artifact that when it ETBs puts a counter on something, well, it's going to ETB and then give all your artifacts, so say you have a bunch of artifact creatures, protection from CMC4, and then it can't target. And since it can't target, you're going to have to give that to your opponent. So there are definitely some cards you don't want to put in your deck when you're building with this. So keep that in mind, that any artifact with an ability that targets other artifacts is not going to work. Which is kind of unfortunate, but and then partner, so obviously you can pair it with someone else who maybe cares about artifacts or gets around that in some way. Who knows? I'm going to do a video once all the spoilers are done, probably a week after Commander Legends release, where I talk about the best partner combos, because we are getting a ton. Next, we have a Radiant Sarah Archangel. It's a 7-cost white legendary creature angel, 6/4, and it has partner, and it has flying, and it says tap another untapped creature you control with flying. It gains protection from the color of your choice until end of turn. So big creature that is going to kind of tap down your little creatures to give it protection, which generally means unless your opponent is purposely trying to tap down your stuff, your opponents are probably going to target your little stuff and then take out Radiant. So obviously that's good, but I kind of wish this had something else like lifelink. For 7 mana, this doesn't feel great. And again, having a commander that's super expensive like this, it really needs to be a good effect. I hate playing 6-cost commanders that have crazy effects, and this is just a 6/4 with flying that can protect itself for 7. If this was maybe a 5-cost commander, a 6/4, like everything stays the same, 5-cost commander, fine. This is clearly in here for the limited environment. I really don't see this being a good partner. Next, we have Kite Skirmisher. It's a 4-cost blue creature human pirate, 3/1 with flying, and it says when it attacks, another target creature attacking the same player or planeswalker gains flying until end of turn, and then it has Encore 5. So essentially what this is going to do is it's going to kind of let your creatures fly, and then let's say he dies, I don't know, you swing, you give something else flying, they choose to block this guy, you can then use his Encore ability to kind of create 3 copies of him from the graveyard that are attacking different players, which are all going to be able to give things flying. Of course, you do need to be fairly aggressive, and this is a blue card, so I don't know if really those two things mix well together, because first off, they have to be attacking the same player, so it's not like you can just use this to give 3 creatures flying. No, you have to be splitting your attack to do this, and blue really isn't wanting to do that. So if this is in like a multicolor deck, maybe, but generally not a big fan of it. Next, we have Kite Corsair. It's a reprint, been in, I believe, 3 sets so far, but it's a 2-cost 2/1 creature human pirate and has flying as long as it's attacking. I'd rather play a 2-cost flyer that's always flying, because there's a lot of effects that like reduce the cost of flyers, give flyers a boost, you know, care about the number of flyers you have, and you really don't want that to only happen while it's attacking. It's not even while it's your turn. So yeah, not a huge fan of this card. Next, we have a card in a different language, so why don't we translate that? It is Forceful Denial. It's 5-cost blue instant with Cascade, and you can counter a target spell. So, you might be like, 5 costs for a counter spell? Yeah, that's a lot, but if you're running a Cascade deck, which in Limited, I could totally see being a thing, you know, we have a decent amount of support, and you'll see a lot more of it today. I could see this being fine. I mean, generally, you want to pay 2, so you're paying 3 extra to Cascade, but the advantage of that is because it's a high CMC spell, your Cascade can hit more expensive stuff. A couple issues: if you're running this card, you're probably running other counter spells, so you may Cascade into another counter spell, in which case you kind of just don't cast it, or if you do, you target the original spell, causing this one to fizzle. I don't know. I don't think it's a great counter spell, but I think if you're running Cascade, it's not a bad inclusion. Next, we have a Merchant Raiders. It's a 4-cost blue creature, human pirate, 2/4, and when it or another pirate enters the battlefield under your control, tap up to 1 target creature. That creature doesn't untap during its controller's untap step for as long as you control Merchant Raiders. So this is actually a pretty good card and would be really good as legendary, because when it enters the battlefield, it's going to tap something down for as long as Merchant Raiders is under your control, okay? So instantly, this is a 4-cost pin down as long as this permanent's on the battlefield. But then you get to pin down additional things for every pirate that enters the battlefield. So essentially, you play this, and then maybe you play a spell that creates 2 pirates. It doesn't say non-token. You have now tapped down 3 things. And so yeah, if you're running a pirate deck, this probably goes in it. It's a pretty good effect, and generally people don't have swarms of creatures. There's a high chance you play this and then play 2 other things, and their creatures are tapped down. Not forever, but all of their creatures are tapped down. So yeah, very, very good card. It's a little deceiving. At first, I thought I was just going to go with the fact of, oh, they don't untap during their, you know, next controller's upkeep, and then that's still good. Pirate equals tap, so it's kind of like a mini removal spell for every pirate, but this is even better. Next, we have Malcolm, Keen-Eyed Navigator. It's a 3-cost blue legendary creature siren pirate, 2/2 with flying, and whenever 1 or more pirates you control deal damage to your opponents, you create a treasure token for each opponent dealt damage. So, wording's a little bit weird there. Essentially, you can at max, say you're playing a 4-player game, create 3 treasure tokens. So if you hit someone with 3 creatures, or 3 pirates, I should say, you are going to generate 1 treasure. But then if you attack 3 different players, all hit them with pirates, and you then create 3 treasures. So he kind of ramps himself, and he doesn't have to actually be the one who hits, so you could play him for 3, swing with a bunch of flying pirates, get that 3 mana back. That's a little bit like Magical Christmas Land, but it is interesting. I think it's one of the better uncommon ones. It very clearly is telling you, hey, you're playing pirates and you're trying to swing, but again, we have this thing of blue splitting its attacks, which I guess it kind of does in the fact that it has unblockable and flying creatures, so it does have that ability, but it's really encouraging you to split your attack, and so I don't know, maybe, I guess this one's more okay because it's less rewarding you. It's rewarding you for dealing damage, it's not encouraging you to win that way. And then it has partner, so you can combine it with someone else, and they have another partner that they're really going to try and get you to use, and we'll see that when we get to the red cards. Next, we have Eyeblight Colors. It's a 5-cost black creature elf warrior, and when it dies, create 3 1/1 elf creature tokens, then mill 3 cards. So when I first saw this, I was like, okay, it's going to have Encore, right? Because then you get the death trigger, you get to create 3 1/1s. No, but what it does do is that it works really well with Encore. First off, Encore is probably run in a deck that's going to self-mill itself because it can activate that ability from the graveyard. Encore, the thing where you create tokens. And this mills, so that's cool. It also has a dice trigger, which Encore decks are probably going to have ways to sacrifice things. And I'm not saying there is going to be an Encore deck in Constructed, but in a limited environment, they're going to probably have ways to sacrifice things or bring things back from the graveyard without the Encore ability. That's kind of going to be what the deck is going to want to do. It's going to fill its graveyard, activate Encore abilities, and then while it's filling its graveyard, it's filling it with creatures. So why don't you include resurrection spells? Or the other way you could play an Encore deck is you have sack outlets, and then you can, bring back the creature as tokens, then sack all of the tokens to generate mana or something like that. So I think this card actually works surprisingly well. I mean, yeah, especially if we see something that gives a creature Encore, this is a great target for that. Next we have Exquisite Huntmaster. It's a 4-cost black creature, elf warrior, and when it dies, create a 1/1 a green elf creature token, and it has Encore 5. So it's very similar to the last one, but it doesn't do the milling. So it's kind of the last one without the milling, and you create a lot less elf warrior creature tokens. But the advantage here is that it has that Encore, and so when you sacrifice the Encore tokens, you do get extra tokens that kind of stick around. So yeah, interesting. Next, we have a Briarblade as Adept. 5-cost black creature elf assassin, and when it attacks, target creature an opponent controls gets -1/-1 till end of turn. Not really great alone, although if they have those utility pieces that have 1 toughness. Also, it does not do the -1/-1 to a creature the defending player controls, so you can attack player 2 and then kill something of player 3's. So that's kind of nice. And then the Encore ability is kind of nice as well, because then you're swinging with 3 creatures. You get to give either something -3/-3, maybe something -2/-2, and another thing -1/-1, or you can give 3 creatures -1/-1. On top of that, you know, you can mess with combat a little bit as well. So yeah, I actually really like the card. Of course, it is a common. I'm not saying it's an amazing card, but I think it has some interesting gameplay choices, which I think Commander is a casual format. I'm not analyzing this of, oh, this is going to break CEDH, because I don't pay attention to CEDH. When I play Commander, I'm playing for fun, and I like to see interesting little things you can do with cards, and so that's what I'm going to point out more. Next, we have Keskit, the Flesh Sculptor. It's a 3-cost black legendary creature, a human artificer 1/3, and you can tap and sacrifice 3 other artifacts and or creatures. Look at the top 3 cards of your library, put 2 of them into your hand and the other into the graveyard. So it's kind of sack 3 creatures and or artifacts, draw 2, and then you also get to mill 1. So in that deck that I was referring to of encoring things from the graveyard, this is probably going to go in there. Why? Because it does the sacrificing that you're probably going to want to do. May I mention, 3 creatures is, if you're in a 4-player game, which is typically what they design around, is going to be the amount of Encore tokens you get. So if you Encore something for 3, swing, and then sacrifice all 3 of the tokens that are going to sacrifice themselves anyway, you get to do this effect. So he seems very purpose-built to interact with Encore. On top of that, you're filling your graveyard to then be able to Encore more stuff out. You're gaining card advantage, and he is partner, so you can probably mix him with like a self-miller or something along those lines. So I think that is a very awesome uncommon commander. Again, some of them have been kind of lame, but this one clearly is wanting you to play Encore. People may not have noticed that, but I think it's a very interesting little touch, that 3 there. Next, we have this card, which is Demonic Knowledge. It's a 3-cost black enchantment, and when it enters the battlefield, draw 3 cards. At the beginning of your end step, you lose 2 life for each card in your hand. So I actually am not a big fan of this card. It's a new card, and I think there are going to be some decks that run it. But first, if we're just talking about you have access to every card, Necropotence is obviously a better card, but I don't think that's a really fair comparison here. What I think is a fair comparison is there is a black enchantment from Theros Beyond Death that when it enters the battlefield, draws you 3 cards and then gives you a penalty. But that penalty, I think, is a lot less harsh. It's whenever you cast a card, or whenever you cast a spell, you lose 1 life. And so it kind of lets you keep those cards in your hand. It actually is encouraging you to kind of do the opposite. This is encouraging you to draw 3 cards and then play them all, which is like, okay. Or the other one is just kind of like, oh yeah, hold up your cards. And the other one has the ability of, whenever it's targeted by a spell, sacrifice it. So it has a way to get rid of it. So it has more intriguing gameplay. This is essentially draw 3 cards and then find a sacrifice outlet. That's it. Versus the other one is draw 3 cards and then balance the amount of spells you're playing, and then maybe pull something that targets it, whether it be some basic spell that really isn't going to do anything, or just a sacrifice spell as well. So I think the Theros Beyond Death version of this card is a lot better, but it is another option out there for people who maybe want to give this to an opponent, for instance. You could draw the 3 cards, pass it to your opponent, and then now they have the downside, you got the upside, and they're going to start losing the game. So I think that's the one big advantage of this card right here. Next, we have Opposition Agent, which is a really interesting card, and I think a very powerful one. It's a 3-cost black creature human rogue 3/2 with flash, and it says you control your opponents while they're searching their libraries. While an opponent is searching their library, they exile each card that they find. You may play those cards for as long as they remain exiled, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast them. So, if you're not sure what this is essentially doing, it's essentially saying, hey, if you play a spell that searches your library, or actually just search your library for any reason, I get whatever you're searching. Now, if it says search your library and put it onto the battlefield, you don't get to put it on your battlefield, you just put it into your hand. But whether they're searching their library to, I don't know, put it in their hand, to put it on the battlefield, to put it on top of their library, searching their library to remove cards. So if someone casts a spell that, like, removes cards from their library, I don't know why they'd be casting it on themselves, and they do have to do that, then you get to actually just search them. And what's interesting is you control your opponent. So it's not like they do this and then they purposely pick a bad card to give you. You control your opponent. And honestly, I think this card would be good even if it didn't have that bottom text. If it was just flash, you control your opponents while they're searching their library because you control them. First off, this has a couple rulings I need to look at. First, because you're controlling them, it's not you pick what cards they choose, it's you control them. That means you can search their entire library. So if you're playing a deck that wants to know what's in your opponent's library, you can do that. Second thing, you can look at their hand, I'm pretty sure, because you control them, and you can also look at any hidden information, because yes, they're searching their library, but also, like, while you're searching your library, you can look at your hand, you can look at your hidden cards. So I'm 99% sure this means you can just look at their hand when they do this. Second thing, you can fail to find. So if they are searching for something, which I don't know why you would fail to find, you know, you can change what they're searching for essentially to nothing if you didn't want something. But here's all the applications. Fetch lands. That is a huge thing. Okay, if your opponent plays, say you're playing mono black, your opponent is playing a fetch land. They crack it. In response to the trigger on the stack, you play this card. Here's what's going to happen. You choose the land from their deck. You take that land, you gain control of it, and then your next turn, you can play it. So essentially, you've destroyed one of their lands, and you're up a land. And this isn't a one-time effect. This is now while this is on the battlefield, no one is searching their library. You're not cracking fetch lands, you're not doing any of that. And the best part is, I would love to make this a legendary creature. There are so many cards that make your opponent search. Field of Ruin is a card that destroys a land, and then each player searches their library for a basic. And that's not an option. That's not optional. You can choose to not find a basic in your library, but you at least have to initiate the search, which then means you control all your opponents. So this plus like Field of Ruin means you look at everyone's hand, I'm 99% sure, and you get to destroy a land, and you get 4 basics. You get to play 4 basics, not at the same turn, but you get access to them. And so, yeah, I think this is a really powerful card. If this was an instant that did this once, this would be a powerful card. But this is a card that sticks around, and it's actually going to probably inspire me to go out and build a certain deck. Actually, I'm probably not going to build it because it's kind of mean. And it's not kind of mean. It is incredibly mean. There is a commander that is a 3 cost, and it says players can't draw cards. At the beginning of each upkeep, the person who is upkeep it is loses 3 life, and they search their library for a card and put it in their hand. So it's essentially giving everyone a choice of any card from their deck instead of drawing a card. Very cool. I think there's a lot of interesting things you can do with it. Now, of course, there are degenerate things you can do with that, but one of them is like Aven Mind Sensor, who essentially like shuts down your opponent from searching their library. But this is even worse. First off, Aven Mind Sensor is white, and that's a black card that I was talking about. So if you want it as your commander, because it is legendary, you can't do that. But here, this card goes in that deck. That card essentially says you never draw a card again, and actually, not only that, but whenever you would draw your first card each turn, I get to search your library, and you get to lose 3 life. So essentially, it's whatever you have in your hand is what you have, unless they have some other way of gaining cards, whether it be like looking at the top card of their library and putting it into their hand that's not technically drawing. But yeah, you get to do that. And so this is going to have an impact. And I know I said I'm not going to talk about like super power level stuff, but this card is insane. Next, we have Profane Transfusion. It's a 9-cost black sorcery, I believe. Then we had a 9-cost blue sorcery yesterday that was also mythic, so it looks like this is going to be a cycle. It says 2 target players exchange life totals. Already insane. You can lower yourself purposely down to 1. Say you're, let's talk about mono black again, necropotence. You can be at 40 life, drop yourself down to 1 by drawing 39 cards, which also you're drawing 39 cards, so that's insane. And then also, you create an XX colorless horror artifact creature token, where X is the difference between those players' life totals. So now you're creating like a maybe 39-39, drawing 39 cards, and setting your opponent's life total to 1. Of course, this is a 9-cost spell, so probably appropriate, but yeah, mono black getting a lot of awesome cards, and even not mono black. Next we have Brazen Freebooter. This is a card already. It's a pirate that ETBs, gives you a treasure. Nice in artifact decks, nice in pirate decks. Pretty generic. Next we have Coastline Marauders. It's a 3-cost red creature human pirate with trample, and when it attacked, it gets +1/+0 for each land defending player controls. So this is really going to punish those decks that are ramping hard with lands, and it has trample. So if they have 11 lands, this is swinging at them for 11 damage. And then it has Encore, so then it can come back late game and maybe get you that win. Next we have Breaches, Brazen Plunderer. It's a 4-cost red legendary creature goblin pirate 3/3 with menace, and whenever one or more pirates you control deal combat damage to deal damage to your opponent. Sorry, this is not even a deal combat damage. Keep that in mind. Exile the top card of those opponents' libraries. You may play those cards this turn, and you may spend mana as though or mana of any color to cast those spells. So remember we had a blue card that kind of did something when you hit an opponent with pirates. So this is kind of the same thing here, except this is not combat damage. I don't remember if the last one was, but that means if you have a pirate that can tap and just deal 1 damage to any target, you can kind of trigger this ability. You get card draw, it has partners, so you can kind of combine them together. Overall, really good. Next, we have Aurora Phoenix. Let's translate this to English. It's a 6-cost red creature Phoenix with flying and cascade. So 6, you can get 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and 0 drops. And whenever you cast a spell with cascade, return it from your graveyard to your hand. So yeah, Phoenix that just keeps coming back, and returning it to your hand is a pretty big deal because then you get to trigger the cascade once again. So pretty good. Next, we have Glut Trooper Capitan, also known as Ember Wild Captain. It's a 4-cost red creature Djinn pirate 4/2, and when it enters the battlefield, you become the monarch. So we're getting a brand new monarch card. It's been kind of disappointing looking at the cards that I've seen so far. There's been like very little new monarch cards, which doesn't really, if you are doing a mechanic in a set and then you don't print new cards for that mechanic, you're not doing anything. You're just making a mechanic cheaper. So that's fine, but I want to see more cards. I want monarch in more games, so yeah. And then it says, whenever you are attacked, if you are the monarch, it deals damage to the attacking opponent equal to the number of cards in their hand. So it's essentially disincentivizing them from attacking you. And it's doing it in such a way that it's based on cards in hand, which essentially means that if they have monarch and then they generate some value from that over a couple turns, and then you steal it back, and then they try to steal it back again, which is a little bit of a convoluted scenario, they're going to be taking even more damage. Essentially, they have to value, is 8 life worth the extra card per turn. So, yep. So next we have this, which translates to entergtress. This is a reprint. Essentially, I put apparently the name of the card as the set that it is from. It is actually from Conspiracy Take the Crown. It is a 5-cost creature. When it ETBs, you become the monarch, and it can block an additional creature as long as you're the monarch, which is nice because then it's harder to hit you. Next, we have Acidic Slime. It's 5-cost green creature ooze, 2/2 with Death Touch, and when it ETBs, destroy target artifact, enchantment, or land. And it was last reprinted in Zendikar Rising Commander, which came out less than a month ago at this point. So, yep. It's nice to see it in extended art, I guess, but it's not a fairly expensive card, but it's also just an uncommon. But you know what is an expensive card? 3 Visits. This is a 2-cost green sorcery, and it says search your library for a forest card, put that card onto the battlefield, and then shuffle your library. So this is essentially Nature's Lore, but a different name, which essentially means in Commander you can run both of them. And this card was only ever reprinted in Masters Edition 3, and that version is going for $130, and it was a common. Now, which by the way, I believe that means it's legal in Pauper, so that's also probably driving up the price. Now it's being reprinted as an uncommon, so we have a $130 card being printed at uncommon. What does that mean? That means the price on of this is about to tank. It's gonna go down really hard. This is gonna go down even worse than like Oubliette. And so, yeah, I expect this price to go down a fair bit, and it's a very good card, and more players getting their hands on it is good. It has brand new art inspired by, looks like, Throne of Eldraine, or at least Eldraine in general. So yeah, of course the image is really blurry. Wish we had better image, but yeah. Next we have Kodama des Astbamis. I totally just butchered that, but it really is Kodama of the East Tree, and I doubt that. But it's a 6-cost green legendary creature spirit with reach. It's also 6/6, and whenever another permanent enters the battlefield under your control, if it wasn't put onto the battlefield with this ability, you may put a permanent card with an equal or lesser converted mana cost from your hand onto the battlefield. So you're gonna throw a permanent onto the battlefield, and then you get to put like another one, and it says a permanent with equal or lesser converted mana cost. So you play a land, which is a permanent, you can put another land. So essentially you play a land, then you get to put another land on the battlefield. It doesn't even say tapped. So you just get 2 lands per turn, essentially. And because the second land entered because of this ability, it doesn't trigger it again. But, you know, you play a 5-drop, you then get to put another 3-drop down or another 5-drop. So yeah, very good. And the fact that it has partner, honestly, I would have been fine with this card if it didn't have partner. But the fact that it has partner means you can add other colors to this. Yeah, I actually think this could be a really good commander. Next, we have Magus Dare, or of the Order. Magus of the Order, 4-cost green creature, human wizard, 3/3, and you can pay green, tap, and sacrifice it and another creature to search your library for a green creature card and put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. So these Maguses are essentially versions of old cards that are put on creatures to make them worse, and they are reprinted, and I believe it was a super cycle. I don't remember their terminology, but it has now apparently been completed with this new edition. So that's pretty awesome. Next, we have Verna, something. So it's Verna, Blooming Chaos. It's a green, blue, red legendary creature, elemental shaman. It's a 4/2, and whenever you cascade, you may put a land card exiled this way onto the battlefield tapped. Now, when I first read this, I thought it said each land card. So I was like, oh my gosh. So if you cascade and like you cast a 0-drop, right? Then, you know, a 0-drop with Cascade, then you just get every land from your deck onto the battlefield, and that's not true. You just get to pick one of the lands, which means you're probably going to pick the best one. Overall, this is yesterday I said, hey, watch out for any cards that say when you cascade, when you cast a spell without paying its mana cost, or when you cast a spell from your library. They work really well with Cascade, and obviously this is going to work well with Cascade, and it's kind of a Cascade ramp, which is exactly what you want to be playing, because Cascade is generally more expensive because you're getting 2 for 1s. So, yep. Next, we have this card, which is Blim, Comedic Genius. It's a 4-cost black and red legendary creature imp, 4/3 with flying. And whenever Blim deals combat damage to a player, that player gains control of a permanent you control of your choice. Then each player loses life and discards cards equal to the number of permanents they control but don't own. So, essentially, you're going to deal combat damage to a player, and then you're going to give them something. And then everyone, including you, is going to lose life and discard cards equal to the number of permanents they control but don't own. So it's very similar to, oh my gosh, Zaydrew, except it's the opposite. First off, I believe Zaydrew has red as well. But Zaydrew essentially rewards you by drawing you cards and gaining you a life for every permanent your opponents control but don't own. This does the opposite. This is going to hurt your opponents for that. So you can kind of just give them things. And what's great is it's not just, oh, you have to give them something, and as a consultation you get to damage them and make them discard cards. No, you're giving them things that are bad. For instance, that enchantment I talked about earlier, the one that makes it so you lose life equal to the number of cards in your hand, which may be a little counterintuitive with Blim kind of doing stuff with, you know, making them discard. But either way, just getting it off of your side of the battlefield is good, and Blim is going to let you do that. Next, we have Maelstrom Wanderer. It is a 8-cost legendary creature elemental, and it says creatures you control have haste. It's a 7/5, and it has Cascade. So obviously, if you're running this in a Cascade deck, pretty good. Great to see it have a reprint. Similarly, we have Silas Wren, Seeker Adept. It's 1 blue-black for a legendary artifact creature human, 2/2 with Death Touch, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, choose target artifact card in your graveyard. You may cast that card this turn, so kind of Artifact Resurrection. Of course, this is a reprint as well. And you'll notice here, and I'm not, these are the original partners. So it looks like they are reprinting all 10 original dual color partners, which makes a lot of sense. You kind of want to make sure all the partners are in circulation, especially if one of them like has a combo blow up with another new partner, which, you know, I'm expecting there to be. So Akira Shirikui, the Usurper. It's a 5-cost black and green legendary creature Naga wizard. 3/7 with menace, and whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you gain life equal to that creature's toughness. So you hit with this, you gain 7. Either way, you combine that with something else. We have Vial Smasher, 3-cost, 2/3, and whenever you cast your first spell each turn, choose an opponent at random. It deals damage equal to that spell's converted mana cost to that player that was chosen at random, and of course partner. We have Kite, 4-cost, green and blue, legendary creature, human wizard. Tap, add colorless to your mana pool for each card you've drawn this turn. Just really good with any partner that wants to draw you cards or use mana. We have Saidar, Kondo de Jamara, which turns into Saidar, Kondo of Jamara, which I've never seen before, but it's a 4-cost green and white 2/5 with flanking, and creatures you control without flying or reach can't block creatures with power 2 or less, including him. This is a long day of spoilers. It's kind of interesting that it has flanking. I get that they didn't want to just not reprint one because it had a mechanic on it, but it's kind of a rogue mechanic in this set. We have Queen Marchesa. I think a lot of people could have called this one just because Monarch is coming back. It makes sense to reprint this, especially because it is such a popular commander. It's a 4-cost, Mardu-colored legendary creature, human assassin, 3/3 with death, touch, and haste, which is pretty good already. But then when it ETBs, you become the Monarch, and then at the beginning of your upkeep, if an opponent is the Monarch, create a 1/1 black assassin creature token with death, touch, and haste. So yeah, it is going to encourage you to stay the Monarch by having her have death touch, and then if you become the not Monarch, if you lose the Monarch, you get little hasty death touchers that may be able to get through, otherwise your opponent's kind of going to have to sack creatures, so pretty cool. And then we have Nekusar, the Mind Razor, 5-cost, Grixis, legendary creature, zombie wizard, 2/4, and at the beginning of each player's draw step, including your opponent's, that player draws an additional card, and then whenever an opponent draws a card, Nekusar deals 1 damage to that player. Pretty good. Essentially, it's going to punish your opponents for drawing. You're going to run lots of wheels in this deck. Of course, the reason I'm not going over these cards too much is that they already exist. Also, in the bottom right, you can see the price in USD to buy these cards right now on Card Kingdom. I know I'm going to get a couple comments about it, so I'm going to address it here. This price is as of October 27th. So if you are watching this in the future, the prices have gone down. Next, we have Reliquary Tower. It's, you have no max hand size, tap, add colorless. It's always nice to have more of these. I feel like they fit in a lot of commander decks. Not every commander deck, like some people may think, but they definitely deserve it. And it's all as if it's a thing. It's the Reliquary Tower needs a reprint as often as it can get one. It was reprinted in Commander 2020, and it has a extended border, so that's kind of cool. We have Marble Diamond and Charcoal Diamond. These both do the same thing, but one adds white and one adds black. They cost 2. They're an artifact. They ETB tapped, and then they tap to add either white or black. Pretty bad, actually. I mean, we have an artifact that costs 2, comes in untapped, and taps for mana of any color. If these didn't come in tapped, I would say, ooh, these are pretty cool, but of course they are reprints, so you can't really judge them for being not as powerful. Next, we have a Prophetic Prism, 2-cost artifact. When it ETBs, draw a card, then you can pay 1, tap, add 1 mana of any color. So it's kind of just a, deck thinner that can also kind of fix your mana if you really need it. We have Sandstone Oracle, 7-cost artifact creature Sphinx, 4/4 with flying, and when it enters the battlefield, choose an opponent. If that player has more cards in hand than you, draw cards equal to the difference. It's kind of expensive, but if you really need that card draw, and someone has like 50 cards in hand, you can kind of match them with this. Next, we have a Blade Griff prototype. It's a 5-cost artifact creature griffin, 3/2 with flying, and when it deals combat damage to a player, destroy target non-land permanent of that player's choice, one of your opponent's control. So I think this is one of the best cards ever for the fact of, first off, you're going to get to swing with a 3/2, and then you're going to make your opponent, and then something gets destroyed, right? Your opponent having less permanents is generally a good thing. So even if you don't get to control what it is still pretty good. If this was just 3/2, swing, a random non-land permanent of an opponent's, gets destroyed, that would be pretty good. But it's even better because your opponent has to make the choice, which essentially means, first off, you can kind of reduce what's getting destroyed down to half the table, because they can't destroy your stuff and they're not going to destroy their own stuff. But also it means they're making the choice, which means if they destroy, say, the person who's in first place's like thing because they're scared of it, well, now they're getting the flack for destroying it, even though they were kind of forced to do so. So you're kind of making your opponents enemies of each other, which kind of leaves you to take back advantage. Now, some players are going to see through it and be like, well, actually, it's not his fault exactly. It is that he chose specifically to attack you, but it's more the person who has this card. So some people are going to see through that, but a lot of people are just going to start arguing amongst each other. So yep, that is going to do it for this video. It has been a very long one, so if you guys enjoyed, I tried to up the quality a little bit more on this one with the translations of the cards being actual, like, cards, not just text on top of other text. I have been slowly improving how I do these. I've added what set things have last been reprinted in. I've added prices to all rares and mythics that are reprints. If you guys have any other suggestions, also let me know in the comments down below. If you want to see more awesome content like this, hit the subscribe button. I'm doing this for every day of spoilers. We are trucking along. So yeah, I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.